Biden has been convicted. Hunter Biden. That's right, a jury of 6 men and 6 women in Wilmington, Delaware found the president's son guilty on all 3 counts relating to making false statements about his drug problem on a 2018 gun purchase application, a crime almost no one is prosecuted for and for which the Fifth Circuit says it's not a crime at all. So everyone's happy now, right? Ha 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 ha. According to Democrats, this shows that the Justice Department is fair and the rule of law applies to everyone, or it's a ticky-tacky conviction of a zealous prosecutor. Unclear. And according to Republicans, it's a diversionary tactic to take heat off the president, or it's the tip of the iceberg of the corruption of the Biden crime family. Not really sure.
This open and shut case is probably the least serious of all the Biden schemes exposed by congressional investigators and a few industrious reporters.
Here to explain the Schrodinger's conviction is chaos lawyer Liz Dye.
Thanks, Devin. After 5 years of digging into every aspect of Hunter Biden's life, the Justice Department finally secured a conviction of the president's only surviving son. Special counsel David Weiss really delivered for the American taxpayers. In other news, Republicans finally found a gun law they like. In 2018, as Joe Biden was gearing up to run for president, Attorney General Bill Barr tasked Weiss, then the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, with investigating any and all crimes by Biden's son Hunter. Congressional Republicans had great hopes that Weiss, a Trump appointee, would kick up something that could connect the younger Biden to his father. But after 6 years, there's been no indication that Joe Biden ever offered his son more than unconditional love and support. Despite his proximity to power, the president's son has had a life marked by tragedy. Hunter and his brother Beau survived the car accident that killed their mother and sister in 1972 as the family was out shopping for a Christmas tree. Just weeks later, their father was sworn in for his first term in the Senate, even as the brothers spent months in the hospital being cared for by their extended family. Hunter recovered from a fractured skull and traumatic brain injuries, and Beau's broken bones healed. Eventually, the brothers both went on to law school. Years later, Beau died from cancer, likely a result of exposure to burn pits in Iraq as a member of the Delaware National Guard. Hunter had long struggled with alcohol and drugs and was administratively discharged from the Naval Reserve in 2014 after failing a drug test. But Beau's death in 2015 seems to have been the impetus for Hunter's descent into debilitating addiction. And thanks to the dissemination of images taken from his laptop in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election, the entire world has seen images of this man naked and smoking crack. As New York Magazine's Andrew Rice and Olivia Nuzzi wrote in their article about how the laptop became public, it is hard to think of a single living individual who has experienced as total an annihilation of digital privacy since our devices became extensions of our consciousness. On October 12, 2018, during the period when he was deep in the throes of addiction, Hunter Biden walked into a gun store in Wilmington and purchased a Colt Cobra 38 SPL revolver. Incident to the purchase, he was required to fill out a firearm transaction record, that's ATF Form 4473, to submit for a National Instant Criminal Background Check. The form asks if the applicant has been convicted in any court, including a military court of a felony, if he is a fugitive from justice, if he is an alien illegally or unlawfully in the United States, and if he is an unlawful user of or addicted to marijuana or any depressant, stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance. Hunter Biden answered no to all of them, which is how he got in this mess, because of course he was addicted to drugs in 2018. And since he was such a mess, he failed to file his taxes for 4 straight years, racking up a debt of $1.4 million to Uncle Sam, which is a crime even if you eventually pay back all the money, which he did. So there was plenty of there for Weiss to charge him with, although not for anything particularly sexy. But Trump and his Republican allies had high hopes that an investigation of Hunter Biden would kick up dirt on his father, Joe, possibly because they saw the movie My Son Hunter and thought it was a documentary.
You're a Biden. Act like one. Everything he built, his life, I just ruined it all.
Hunter Biden had long been accused of trading on his family name to make a living. That's hardly out of the ordinary in Washington, D.C., where family members of politicians routinely trade on their proximity to power. The Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund handed Jared Kushner $2 billion approximately 5 minutes after he left the White House. See also Ginny Thomas, who has long earned a living in conservative think tanks despite being your nuttiest aunt who forwards you spam emails but makes those delicious rum balls at Christmas. And Hunter Biden did actually go to Yale Law School and practice law, so he wasn't entirely without qualifications. But politics is a blood sport. So when his dad announced that he was running for president, Hunter Biden's business dealings, particularly with foreign companies, became a prime target for Republicans. They fixated especially on Hunter's position on the board of the Ukrainian oil company Burisma. The theory was that Joe Biden, as vice president, had leaned on the Ukrainian government in 2016 to fire its chief prosecutor, Viktor Shokin, so that it would benefit his son's business interests. In reality, the Ukrainian investigation into Burisma had been shelved the prior year, and it was the consensus of the entire Western establishment, including the International Monetary Fund, the European Union, and the U.S. government's foreign policy agencies, along with Ukrainian democratic reformers, that Shokin had to go. In fact, several Republican senators, including Wisconsin's Ron Johnson, signed a letter demanding it themselves. Although that didn't stop Johnson from falsely accusing Biden of taking the exact same position as part of an elaborate bribery scheme. After spending years hyping the Burisma story and still coming up with nothing to impeach Biden with, MAGA World pinned its hopes on Weiss to finally nab the Biden crime family. And it certainly looks like political pressure from Congress was what wound up derailing Biden's plea deal. According to the New York Times, Weiss's office spent a year negotiating agreements with Hunter Biden's lawyers and then refusing to go through with them when the political blowback got too hot. In May of 2015, Weiss's deputy Leslie Wolf proposed that Hunter agree to a deferred prosecution agreement. But then, IRS agents assigned to the case testified to Congress that their efforts to delve deeper into Biden's tax records had been stymied. Weiss himself testified that the agents were wrong, but by then, the original deal was off the table. In June, Biden agreed to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanors for failing to pay his taxes and enter into a diversionary program for the gun charge, meaning that he'd have to stay clean for 2 years and give up his right to own a gun forever, but then the government would not charge him. His attorneys believed that the plea deal would end all the ongoing investigations and let their client get on with his life. But in the meantime, House Oversight Chair James Comer and Republican Senator Chuck Grassley had kicked up what they insisted was a smoking gun linking Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and Burisma. The smoking gun was an FBI informant named Alexander Smirnov, who briefly mentioned to his handler in 2017 that Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma. In May of 2020, when Rudy Giuliani began flinging wild allegations about the Bidens and Burisma, Smirnov vowed to come up with evidence to prove it. The next month, he suddenly remembered that in late 2015 or early 2016, he traveled to Kyiv, Ukraine, and Vienna, Austria, for meetings with Burisma executives who'd bragged that they'd hired Hunter Biden to protect us through his dad from all kinds of problems, and that it cost $5 million to pay Joe Biden and $5 million to pay Hunter Biden. This was an obvious lie, disproven by cursory examination of Smirnov's travel records, and it would appear that his FBI handler just ignored it. But that did not stop Comer and Grassley from trumpeting Smirnov as evidence that the FBI was covering up serious crimes involving the president and his son. In the FBI's record, Burisma executive claims that he didn't pay the big guy directly, but that he used several bank accounts to conceal the money. That sounds an awful lot like how the Bidens conduct business, using multiple bank accounts to hide the source and total amount of the money. Don't blame me, man. That's what he sounds like. House Ways and Means Chair Jason Smith tweeted, "The FD 1023 form showing proof that Joe and Hunter Biden were involved in the $5 million bribery scheme with a Burisma executive has been released. Thank you, Chuck Grassley." The whole thing was nonsense, though, and Smirnov wound up getting indicted in February of 2024 for making false statements to a federal agent. But by then, the Hunter Biden plea agreement had imploded. And journalist Marcy Wheeler makes a pretty convincing case that it was due to political pressure on Weiss to go chasing after Smirnov's lies, even after they'd been dismissed out of hand by the FBI agents investigating them. On July 26 of 2023, Hunter Biden appeared in Judge Mary Ellen Noriega's Delaware courtroom. The plan was for him to plead guilty and put the investigation to an end. In fact, he and Assistant U.S. Attorney Leo Wise had both signed a plea agreement and a diversion agreement in anticipation of closing the case. But Judge Noriega purported to be extremely troubled by the court's role in supervising Biden's compliance with the agreement. Reading between the lines, it looks like Biden's lawyers and the special counsel tried to make a sort of creative arrangement which would protect Biden in the event that Trump got reelected and put his henchmen in charge of the Justice Department. It's not hard to imagine Trump's allies looking for any reason to find Hunter Biden in violation of his probation and throw him in jail. It seems like the goal was to make the court the arbiter of whether Biden was living up to his end of the deal, not the Justice Department. The agreements were also a little hand-wavy on whether Biden could be charged with other crimes in relation to his overseas business deals. At the hearing, Judge Noriega refused to bless this arrangement. She complained, "You put me right smack in the middle of the diversion agreement that I should have no role in. You plot me right in there, and then on the thing that I would normally have the ability to sign off on or look at in the context of a plea agreement, you just take it out and you say, 'Your Honor, don't pay any attention to that provision not to prosecute because we put it in an agreement that's beyond your ability.'" And then Assistant U.S. Attorney Leo Wise said that the special counsel was still investigating Biden for possible violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act in connection with his overseas business deals, i.e., they were investigating the Smirnoff allegations. And the judge said, could the government bring a charge under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, to which Leo Wise said yes. And then Biden's attorney, Christopher Clark, who thought he'd negotiated a deal to get rid of all his clients' potential criminal liability, said, I don't agree with what the government said. To which Wise responded, then there is no deal. And although Biden eventually agreed to everything the government asked for, the court would not sign off on it. That plea deal was dead. 2 weeks later, David Weiss, who was still at that point acting in his position as U.S. Attorney for Delaware, asked for and received an appointment as special counsel. Attorney General Merrick Garland signed the order on August 11, giving Weiss authority to file charges nationwide and ensuring greater congressional access to his eventual report. It was clear then that Weiss was going to bring the hammer down on the president's son. And on September 14th, he announced a 3-count indictment for making a false written statement on the Form 4473, lying to a gun dealer, and possessing a firearm while addicted to an unlawful narcotic. The gun case went back to Judge Noriega in Delaware, but the tax charges were another matter. Because incident to the scuppered plea deal, Biden had waived venue, allowing prosecutors to charge him in Delaware for failing to pay taxes in years when he was not a Delaware resident. With the plea deal up in smoke, that was no longer an option, which is one of the reasons Weiss needed that special counsel appointment. In December, Weiss charged Biden in California with a 4-year scheme to not pay at least $1.4 million in self-assessed federal taxes he owed for years 2016 through 2019, from in or about January 2017 through in or about October 15, 2020, and to evade the assessment of taxes for tax year 2018 when he filed false tax returns. The 9-count indictment includes 3 felonies and 6 misdemeanors. The case was assigned to Judge Mark Scarzi, another Trump appointee, and is set to go to trial in Los Angeles on September 5th.
Now, obviously, if a special counsel is investigating you, you'll want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, my law firm, the Eagle team, can help. If you've gotten in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially if you got one of those data breach letters saying that your information had been leaked in the hack, or dealing with a workers' comp or social security issue, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. It's so important to talk to a lawyer right away so you can get the best representation and find out what your options are. So just click on the link in the description or call the number on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team. So you can click below.
Biden's lawyers filed a raft of motions in their unsuccessful bid to get the gun case dismissed. They argued that the plea and diversion agreements were binding contracts that gave Hunter immunity. They argued selective and vindictive prosecution. They argued that the special counsel was unlawfully appointed. All of those motions were swiftly rejected. But Biden's lawyers also argued that his case should be dismissed because the law at issue violates the Second Amendment. And while that motion was denied, like all the others, it probably presents the most fertile ground for appeal. Because in 2022, the Supreme Court ruled in a case called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin that it was illegal for the state of New York to require a concealed carry gun permit. Justice Clarence Thomas, who authored the decision, said that such permits are not in keeping with the country's historical tradition of firearm regulation and thus violate the Second Amendment. This was widely interpreted as an invitation to challenge all gun regulations, and in August of 2023, the Fifth Circuit took SCOTUS up on the offer. In a case called U.S. v. Daniels, it found that at no point in the 18th or 19th century did the government disarm individuals who used drugs or alcohol at one time from possessing guns at another. They said that while our history and tradition may support some limits on an intoxicated person's right to carry a weapon, it does not justify disarming a sober citizen based exclusively on his past drug usage. The court invalidated the ban on a habitual drug user possessing a firearm under 18 U.S.C. section 922G3. Now, that Daniels ruling is only valid in the Fifth Circuit, and Delaware is in the Third. But it seems pretty likely that this interpretation of the law will get a warm reception at the Supreme Court, which is striking down gun regulations right and left. And indeed, Hunter Biden's lawyers referenced the Daniels case and said they intend to appeal the conviction on Second Amendment grounds. So, fun stuff coming. But as of now, Section 922 is still good law in the Third Circuit. So it was indeed illegal for Biden to possess and purchase a gun back in 2018 when he was addicted to drugs. And look, there was plenty of evidence. The prosecution played Biden reading his own memoir where he talks about smoking crack and being strung out. They had the gun permit application, and they had testimony from the women in Biden's life describing him using crack cocaine more or less constantly. Biden's ex-wife Kathleen Bewley testified that he began using crack cocaine in 2015 and that she routinely searched his car for drugs and paraphernalia to make sure that their teenage daughters wouldn't find them. His former girlfriend Zoe Keston said that at times he was smoking crack every 20 minutes. But the most devastating testimony came from Hallie Biden, Beau Biden's widow, whom Hunter Biden became romantically involved with after his brother's death. Like Bewley, Hallie Biden searched Hunter's car. And in addition to drugs, she found that gun on October 23, 2018, just 11 days after he bought it. She testified, "I panicked and I wanted to get rid of them. I didn't want him to hurt himself, and I didn't want my kids to find it and hurt themselves." And so, Hallie put the revolver in a shopping bag and threw it in the trash can outside the local grocery store. But when Biden realized what she'd done, he was furious because the gun was registered in his name and it was now out in the world where God knows who could use it to commit crimes. And not for nothing, but Biden's father, a known supporter of gun control measures, was about to be running for president. Hallie went back to retrieve the gun, but she searched the trash cans and it was gone. She went into the store to tell the management what had happened and see if they had taken out the trash, and that's when the cops were called. Eventually, the police tracked down the gun in the possession of a man who often went through the trash looking for recyclables. The state attorney general declined to charge Biden, and that would have been the end of it if Weiss hadn't been tasked with finding dirt on Trump's kid. Biden's lawyer, Abby Lowell, tried to convince the jurors that his client hadn't knowingly lied since he didn't consider himself to be an addict at the time he filled the form out. But the jury didn't buy it, and after just a few hours' deliberation, they returned a unanimous guilty verdict. The special counsel raced to give a press conference where he said that the case wasn't about prosecuting an addict who illegally owned a gun that he never once used for 11 days in 2018. It's about the rule of law. Not too sure about that one. According to a 2018 report from the Government Accountability Office, there were approximately 112,000 denials in 2017 based on the background check form Biden filled out. Those resulted in 12,710 federal investigations, leading to a whopping 12 federal prosecutions. The report says that, in accordance with Justice Department criteria, the ATF only refers cases to U.S. attorneys for prosecution when aggravating circumstances exist, such as violent felonies or multiple serious offenses over a short period of time, none of which exist here. We'll likely get a sense of whether Weiss really does intend to hold Biden no more accountable than any other citizen in the lead up to sentencing, which typically takes place within 120 days of the verdict. The prosecutor will have to submit a pre-sentencing memo, and if he asks for a long jail sentence, possibly more than a decade for a first-time nonviolent offender, well, that would be atypical. President Biden has vowed not to pardon his son or commute his sentence. Instead, he put out a statement saying that he and his wife love their son and are proud of the man he is today. So many families who have had loved ones battle addiction understand the feeling of pride seeing someone you love come out the other side and be so strong and resilient in recovery. As I also said last week, I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal. Jill and I will always be there for Hunter and the rest of our family with our love and support. Nothing will ever change that. Republicans, who complained loudly about the plea deal, which would have let Biden escape prosecution, are no happier now that Weiss has put the president's son on trial. On his official House webpage, Representative Comer complained that today's verdict is a step toward accountability, but until the Department of Justice investigates everyone involved in the Biden's corrupt influence peddling schemes that generated over $18 million in foreign payments to the Biden family, it will be clear department officials continue to cover up for the big guy, Joe Biden. Former Trump White House advisor Stephen Miller tweeted that the Department of Justice is running election interference for Joe Biden. That's why DOJ did not charge Hunter with being an unregistered foreign agent or any crime connected with foreign corruption. Why? Because all the evidence would lead back to Joe. And Trump's campaign immediately released a statement calling the trial nothing more than a distraction from the real crimes of the Biden crime family, which has raked in tens of millions of dollars from China, Russia, and Ukraine. Well, obviously, President Biden is using the Justice Department to protect his family by allowing it to try his son twice and potentially put him in jail for decades. He's only pretending to be a dad who loves his child and is heartbroken at the prospect of seeing him go to jail. It all just makes too much sense.
Yeah, but whether you hate Biden or love guns, the odds of Biden's conviction being thrown out on constitutional grounds just got way less likely. On Friday, June 21st, the Supreme Court released their decision in U.S. v. Rahimi, which modified the prior test for gun restrictions in the Bruen case and upheld a gun law regarding domestic abusers. In the majority opinion, Chief Justice Roberts stated the Second Amendment cases, quote, were not meant to suggest a law trapped in amber. Instead, courts must determine, quote, whether the new law is relatively similar to laws that our tradition is understood to permit, applying faithfully the balance struck by the founding generation to modern circumstances. which is a way more forgiving test than the prior Bruin test. So love it or hate it, the Hunter Biden conviction is more likely to stick. And now that he's not smoking crack, he'll probably want a good cup of coffee, which you can get with today's sponsor, Trade Coffee. Trade's great because not only do they have a huge selection of your favorite coffees, but they have a matching process that lets you discover fresh coffee from across the globe based on your taste preferences. And now that summer is here, it's the perfect time to drink your coffee ice cold. And Trade is leaning fully into the iced coffee cold brew summer wave, and you can shop from their curated selection of beans, perfect for cold brew, or 6 packs of boutique canned coffee that you can pop right in your fridge. Right now, I probably have about 2 dozen of those little suckers in my refrigerator, and I will not apologize for that. But you can get great coffee every week or gift a coffee subscription to a friend or loved one. All you have to do is choose how often you want to receive your beans, and then you can personalize the rest. I have very specific tastes in coffee. I basically want something that tastes like hot chocolate and pairs well with milk, and Trade was able to find me the perfect bean. And of course, you claim you want a tea-like natural light roast, but really you want a dark roast that tastes like chocolate and you can load up with half and half. But either way, Trade has you covered. And if you already know what you like, then they probably already have your preferred roaster in stock at a great price. You can choose whole beans or your preferred grind, and your coffee is roasted to order, so it's coming to you really fresh. Way fresher than some supermarket coffee that's been sitting on the shelf for a week. In fact, Trade is so confident you'll love your experience, they're offering 30% off your first order. All you have to do is click on the link in the description or the one that's on screen right now. It's a great opportunity to spice up your morning routine and try some delicious coffee. So get 30% off your first order by clicking on the link below. After that, click on this link over here for more Legal Eagle, or I'll see you in court.